Welcome everyone to another evening of Northshire Live. I'm David Wood. I'm the events manager at Northshire's Manchester, Vermont location. And I'm here as almost always with my good friend and colleague, Rachel Person from Northshire's Saratoga Springs, New York location. Just a few things before Rachel introduces our authors tonight. We are recording this event for future broadcast for in perpetuity on YouTube. But don't worry, only those of us who are speaking and unmuted in this nice little yellow box will be appearing there. So if you have any questions for our authors, please type them in the chat box, and Rachel and I will be sure to ask them when we get to the Q&A at the end of the event. Likewise, the last sort of thing I'd like to say is just a note of thanks. Thank you both. Thank you all so much for supporting Northshire. It's been a hard year for businesses, for independent businesses and local businesses of all sorts. And through your support has really got us through. So we appreciate it greatly. So without further ado, Rachel, take us away.
Hi, everybody. Tonight, I'm so happy to be able to welcome Jean Hanff Korelitz to Northshire Live. She's the author of the novels You Should Have Known, which aired on HBO as The Undoing, Admission, which was adapted as a film of the same name, The Devil and Webster, The White Rose, The Sabbath Day River, and A Jury of Her Peers, as well as Interference Powder, a novel for children. Her amazing sounding company, Book the Writer, hosts pop-up book groups in which small groups of readers discuss new books with their authors. And she's with us tonight to talk about her new novel, The Plot, which is already an Indie Next and New York Times bestseller. We're delighted that she'll be interviewed tonight by Rebecca Makkai, who returns to Northshire Live after her wonderful interview of Chris Palian last spring. Her most recent novel, The Great Believers, is a Northshire staff favorite, won the American Library Association's Carnegie Medal, and was a finalist for both the National Book Award and the Pulitzer Prize. Please join me.
Thank you so much.
Hey, Rebecca.
Hey, how are you? So I have so many things to ask you, and this is funny because we've all, in a small way, we've already done a Zoom event together, and I still have infinite questions to ask you about this.
Maybe we should start there by saying how we know each other.
I think we should do that. Yes,
right? Because it's a very Vermont / upstate New York story, but more on the side of the border.
Yeah.
Okay, you go first.
Well, so Jean's husband Paul is a poet, and he taught for many years at the Breadloaf School of English at Middlebury College, which is their summer graduate program, which I only live in Vermont in the summers, but if you could see through that mountain across the way, you'd be seeing Breadloaf in the distance. So I went there in the summer of 1999 for the first time, about a week out of college, and started graduate school. And Jean was pushing, I think, baby Asher around in a real pram.
That's right. Now we had this gold built-right pram from the 1950s or 60s that I'd found at a flea market. And, you know, of course, the modern moms have strollers, but I fell in love with this pram. And I was prepared to give it up, you know, when it proved impractical, but it was absolutely the most marvelous device. And as the summer went on, it kind of revealed its glories. It broke down by this button and it folded up by this button. And it was just so darn cool that he really spent the first couple months of his life in that gold pram.
I love it. And this is the thing, if you've ever been, I know probably some Vermonters and upstate New Yorkers, if you've ever been up Route 25 in Vermont and you've seen these yellow buildings that are Breadloaf off to the side, it is rustic, and these are stone paths, and it's a tiny campus, and so it's not like down the streets of New York or down the streets of London in the pram. It was amazing.
If I realized we were going to talk about this, I would have dug out a photo. I don't want to start going on my phone, but it really was the most divine thing, and we still have the pram. Of course, I can't get rid of it.
Oh, good. That makes me so happy. But yeah, I learned quickly thereafter that Jean was a writer of fiction. I think she had at that point one book out.
I think the second one, The Sabbath Day River, had just. I went to book events very pregnant, so it had just come out.
Yeah, and so we got to know each other over the summers. I studied a little bit with her husband, but we kind of started bonding as fiction writers. And that was 22 years ago.
God. And then you wrote book number 1, which was very promising, and book number 2, which was really good. And then book number 3 just made me, I mean, it's one of the best books I've ever read.
Oh, thank you.
Beavers is a incredibly beautiful. In fact, I was thinking about it just the other day. Something came up about an animal in a novel. And I know what it was. It was my novel. Somebody wrote to me and said, and I don't want to, this is not a big giveaway, but thanks for not harming the cat, which will make sense to you. And I wrote back and I said, no animals were harmed in the writing of this book. And then I said, you should really read The Great Believers on this subject. I also wrote
a completely different book, but there's also a cat who doesn't come to any harm.
Ultimately,
that's fantastic.
I was very worried about the cat in your book, though. I totally understand why this guy was so concerned. I mean,
yeah,
we can't help them. All we can do is watch them suffer. So.
Oh my God, well, that's fantastic. Well, I'm so excited. So this book came out 3 weeks ago now.
May 11th.
May 11th. So almost a month ago now. Then more than a month ago. And I keep independently hearing about people reading it. I posted on Twitter and a friend was like, oh, 3 out of 4 people in my family read that. Someone on Facebook the other day, they didn't tag you. I don't think it's a person who knows you, but it's a writer talking about how she struck up a conversation with the guy next to her on the plane, and they had this long talk and whatever. But the reason she struck up a conversation was she saw that he was reading the plot. And she was like, oh, this guy has good taste in books. And so she started talking. And it was this lovely story.
They're married and they have 4 kids, right?
right. No. But he was this older man who it turned out had like worked with her father as a doctor. It was this incredible story.
Wow.
And she wasn't, she didn't tag you. She just said who's reading the plot. So I was like, this is great. So that's, I think, the sign, that a book is really doing well.
Well, it's
hard to tell,
when
it's
personal benchmarks that I have never experienced. Believe me, I've been taking planes for many years, and every time I see somebody reading a book,
yes,
what they're reading, guess what? It's never been a book by me. If I were to see somebody reading this book on the subway or a plane, I would really feel that I have made it.
I've had a lot of friends send me photos of people reading my book on a plane or a subway, or texted me, whatever. But yeah, never, that is a real point of, my favorite story about that is that he tweeted this, Colson Whitehead a few years ago was like, so I just finally had this moment where I saw someone reading my book on the subway and I felt like I should introduce myself, but then I chickened out because I was really embarrassed that I was wearing the same shirt as in my author photo. I was like,
that's funny.
I get it.
Well, Martin Amis actually writes about this moment. Martin Amis, people have said of the plot that it is, it's the book about authorial failure. And of course, it is a book about authorial failure, but the book about authorial failure is Martin Amis's novel, The Information.
Yes.
If you ever want to experience the depths of despair that a writer can experience, and he spares nothing. In fact, he like the dentist in Marathon Man, he drills down into the suffering and failure. And there's a moment in that book where the failing novelist sees somebody on a bus in London reading his book, and he's so happy. And it turns out that this is some thug who's been hired to murder him. So he's trying to read the book to sort of look at the picture on the back to see what it looks like.
Oh my God. So, the moment that I remember from that book particularly, and then I want to lead into a question about your book, but was that he goes on a trip. He has to bring his own books, and it's like 25 books, and he's getting a bad back from it, to this event. And he sits there beside his very successful friend who has this long line. He has no line. And then finally someone comes up, but it's to return a book. He's like, I don't want this anymore. And so he has to go home with 26 books in the bag.
Oh, it is so painful. So painful.
Very real.
Yeah,
like no matter, yeah,
yeah,
very
well,
real.
there's an anthology, I don't know, maybe Rachel knows this anthology. It's called I Should Have Stayed Home. And it's an anthology of essays by writers about the humiliation of being writers. And it's a great book. They didn't ask me to contribute to it, so I'm doubly humiliated. But I could have written
Maybe they figured you've never been humiliated. They were like, she
I
doesn't
wasn't
have any
even
stories
on
like that.
the
She's
radar
great.
of humiliated authors. I was so obscure. I wasn't even known for being a humiliated author.
Oh God. Well,
But anyway,
yeah. So a question that I have, because we were talking about, this is very much a novel about being a writer.
yeah.
And you've had very creative types before in your books. You've had very intellectual types, but this is really like, especially the first few chapters, this guy, Jake, is a frustrated writer. One of my many questions about that is, is there a fear as you write that readers are going to think that you're complaining, or that it's about you, or
I don't
is
mind
there
if they think it's about me. I don't mind anything. But the more common thing is, what do you know about being a failed writer? And the answer, of course, is plenty, because we're all Jake, no matter where we are.
Yeah.
He is right there. If we're not busy being Jake, the memory of being Jake is right in the rear view mirror.
right?
There's plenty about Jake that is pretty despicable. I mean, he is not a guy I would want to have a beer with at all. But one of the few things that I do respect about Jake is that he doesn't blame anyone else for his situation. He feels he's done the work, and he's tried to do his best, and he has submitted himself to, put himself under the aegis, under the authority of readers and agents, and taken his chance with the universe, and it just hasn't happened for him. But he doesn't go around saying, oh, it's because I'm fill in the blank. I'm this
Mhm.
ethnicity, I'm this gender, they want this and not my delicate, beautiful
Right.
situation. He just feels like it just didn't happen for him. And I guess that's something that I connect with. And he's not a likable guy. People know better, I hope, than to go to my novels for wonderful, likable characters.
How to live well.
I do get plagued by this. Maybe you do as well. But I just didn't like her. I don't like anybody in this book, and I just want to say, well, I'm sure they wouldn't like you either. Why are we talking about finding our best friends with
Yeah.
a novel? Go
Yeah.
find them at the bookstore.
Yeah.
Find them somewhere else. But
Right.
anyway,
And
I probably sounds very harsh, but
no, but it's funny because it is this, it's funny. I think we all get that as writers. And I think that we all have felt that at certain points as readers too. I wonder to what extent. It's funny because I think readers will say that to a writer, almost just to say, they feel strongly about it. They want to say it without realizing, the ways in which it might be not very helpful for a writer to hear.
oh my God. I mean, just think of, look, we're writers are readers. We're readers, we're fans. There are writers who, if they walked in this room right now, I would be speechless with
Yeah.
awe. I would make an idiot of myself because I'm such a fan. But I do think there are things that are not helpful to hear. I mean, to have somebody say to you, "Oh, I can't wait to read your book, and then I'm going to give you my critique."
Oh God.
If I put in the plot, that was something somebody once said to me, and I just like, this book is in print. It is too late for your critique, and I do not want to know if you
Yes.
find something awful.
Yeah.
One of the worst things that anybody has ever said to me, and I'm sorry to say, Rachel and David, that it was a person at a bookstore, but not an independent bookstore. And this was so awful that I actually put it in the plot. This woman was introducing me at a bookstore, and just before she did that, she turned to me. She turned to me and she said, "Oh, I read the beginning and the end of your book and it was just great." And I just remember thinking, you are in the wrong job. This is not the job for you. But
Okay.
I'm sure you have things like that too, where part of you is going, I am appalled, and part of you is going, can I just write that down for
Yeah. Oh
somewhere?
my God. Well, I understand there are times when you might need to check out a book that way, but you don't say it, right? It's, yeah. Oh God.
Say it to the author as you're about to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ah,
Well, one of the things that I kind of on that note of like Jake doesn't blame other people for, his failure to be a huge success early on. One thing that I actually admire about him, and it's something that I admire about you too as a writer, is his recognition of how much plot matters. Because I feel like I know so many beautiful writers who are doing beautiful, beautiful things, and they don't particularly contain a plot, or the plot is someone thinks back on their life while looking out a window. It's like, okay, cool.
I've read
If
that
that's really what you want to write, then write that. But don't be shocked that that's not, how books go a little bit.
Right.
Right. And, it's interesting. It seemed, he knows that, and he knows that he hasn't had that. And he knows when he sees that plot, that it, and for people who have not read the book yet, he has a student who was going to write a book, and the student told him the idea. The student passes away, and plots are not copyrighted. There's nothing wrong with taking, this is how the Lion King can be Hamlet. This is right.
And
Yeah.
and the other examples I tend to trot out here are Charles Frazier's Cold Mountain is the Odyssey, and Jane Smiley's Thousand Acres, beautiful novel, is King Lear. And I mean, we all
those are maybe more sophisticated examples than the Lion King. So thank you.
No, I used the Lion King. You'd already taken it, but I mean, two of my previous novels are homages to previous plots. I'm sorry, I'm sitting with them all. That's here. I'm sitting next to my book of copies. I mean, my shelf of copies, which is why I keep glancing over here. But my novel, The White Rose, is Der Rosenkavalier, the Strauss opera set in New York City in the 1990s. And my novel, Sabbath Day River, is The Scarlet Letter, set in New Hampshire in the 1980s. So, I mean, I've done it. I don't think it is a bad thing to do. But this is closer to some moral crisis because the student is dead. The student did not intend to let anybody else write this book. He didn't like the student. He was envious of the student, and now the student is gone under, as it may turn out, somewhat dubious circumstances.
Right.
So there is a lot of reasons to tread very cautiously, but he is a writer, and this plot grabs him the way it grabbed me, and he knows how special it is, just like I knew how special it was.
Well, so here's a question, because the whole time that I'm reading your book, I'm like, there's this mention early on of like the plot, and we don't know what it is at first. And I was like, well, there's no way that she's going to come out and put it out there, because it can't live up to the buildup where it's like, this is a great plot. This is a great plot. And if you put it out there,
I'm like, yeah, I've heard that before. I heard that on Law and Order,
But then, yeah, you do. And it's like, oh my God, yes, that is a fantastic, fantastic plot twist. Was that, where did that plot twist come in to the book and to the thinking, the twist that he steals?
Right.
Where did you get that?
It came from the fairies. I mean, I've written novels that literally took 20 years of thinking about them.
Yeah.
I wrote the first word. I mean, that novel, The White Rose, I thought about it for 20 years. Sabbath Day River, also thought about it for many years. Twice in my life, I've had these kind of thunderbolts. Once, the first time was with You Should Have Known, which became The Undoing. And the second time took place in January of 2020. And I don't know if I've told you the story, but I had been working on a very different novel, and it wasn't quite coming together. It was a completely non-thriller novel about a very messed up family in Brooklyn with triplets who all loathe one another. And I had been through a couple rounds with my editor, and she was literally not buying this book. And I was in her office having a very upsetting meeting, and I knew it was going to be. I was so prepared for this terribly upsetting meeting that I made my husband come with me to the meeting, and I parked him in the Starbucks across the street. But I wanted him in the room. I mean, I was that upset. He thankfully had the wherewithal to say, I will stay in the Starbucks. And in the middle of this meeting, where we were discussing yet again why she wasn't buying the book yet, I kind of downloaded this entire idea, which I had never spoken aloud, which I had barely thought through. And the two pieces that I had that, were the tent poles of this book, one of this washed up writer who appropriates a plot that does not belong to him, and two, what the plot is. So I'm telling my editor this, and I'm kind of filling in a few other bits and pieces. And then I tell her what the plot is. And that's when her jaw dropped open. I was very gratified because
wow.
as far as I knew, I was in the middle of a terrible meeting that, if it wasn't ending my career or my career with her, it was, it meant another year of work, at least, on this book. And suddenly the whole temperature of this meeting changed. And the next day she called my agent and bought both books.
Wow.
So I had gone from being unable to sell one book
oh my God.
selling two. I mean, then of course I had to write this new book. But then we had this horrible global situation in which the only thing that I wanted to do or could do was write this novel, the plot. Yeah. So I did. And now for the record, I'm now back working on the other book, which, knock wood, will be published next spring.
Yeah. And maybe that one some of them take a little longer to cook, it probably.
I hope so. I mean, I have a big complex about it now, because even if it is as good as it can be, it's not a suspense novel. There's no crime. Nobody jaywalks even in this book. I mean, there are plenty of twists, but none of them involve, crime or anything like that.
I think you need to put a jaywalking in.
I gotta put a jaywalking in.
Solution, Jane.
All right, I'm gonna put
page 300, like crucial moment.
Jaywalking.
Please do.
A lot of the book takes place at Cornell, actually. So,
oh, cool.
If you jaywalk at Cornell, you fall into a gorge.
That's it. It's over for you. You're right off the cliff. Oh man. Oh my God. Oh, I can't wait. That's exciting. I like that as a setting.
A very long answer that basically says, I have no idea where this came from.
That's incredible.
But I knew what it was when I.
Yeah. One of the things that fascinates me too is it's not, there is and I'm going to be careful here for people who haven't finished the book yet or haven't read it yet, but there's basically a huge double twist, because there's the twist of the plot, and then there's the way that the world is kind of twisted out from under Jake in the long haul. And I'm fascinated. It's something that it's the kind of plot twist that I think some readers, in terms of what happens in the real world to Jake or the real world of the novel, right? I think it's the kind of plot twist that probably some readers might figure out a little early and plenty wouldn't. I think it's gratifying both ways. I think that a really good, when you can be a little smarter than the main character.
Yes, that's not hard in this case.
Right. I mean, that's dramatic irony, right?
In some ways, but he doesn't see what's in front of him. That's true.
Yeah.
We were talking a little bit before about this strange thing that seems to be happening, where I keep hearing from a lot of readers who feel the need to tell me that they figured it out before I was ready to tell them. And look, the readers of this book are very smart. I think readers of books are smart, and I think readers of thrillers in particular are testing themselves against the author. I do this too. You probably do too. We feel good about ourselves if we figure it out on page 30 and the reveal is on page 31. We're like, yay, us. But one of the things that I do enjoy hearing is when people then say, even though I suspected, it didn't take away from my enjoyment.
Yeah. I think for me, that's part of it. I was someone, it wasn't super early, but it was before Jake. I'll say that. Where I was like, ooh.
When
And
people say they figured it out, they're talking about one particular thing.
one
Nobody
particular,
has ever told me that, and I guess they would tell me that they figured out the gestalt of
no. No, it's basically the thing that's happening to Tom in the real world, kind of right under his nose. Which hopefully means something to people who've read the book, and everyone who has not read the book will completely forget that I said that. I think for me that's the best moment actually as a reader, when you go, like, it's not, I'm not realizing it because I'm being told it. I'm realizing it because I'm realizing it. And it's like this like sinking feeling of like, oh my God. And I'm kind of flipping back and being like, is this pot? Oh my God, is this where she's going? And then getting confirmation a little bit, like that fits, oh shit. I think that's the best thing, right? And I get, I think that for a lot of people, the thriller, the mystery, it's like it is like they think that they're playing mastermind against someone or something, right? Like you have to like get me, I have to be shocked by what you reveal. It's like, no, I mean, the best book is going to work both ways, right? Yeah. It's going to work in the moment when you figure it out, and it's going to work ahead of time if you're like, oh my God, I think I know. Yeah. And that it did it. So.
Well, it's been very gratifying to have people even care enough to and say that they figured it out, or
Right.
I mean, this is unprecedented in my career. A lot of people don't realize that or believe it because they heard about me when Nicole Kidman was on their TV screen. And so it feels as if I have sprung fully formed from the foam of the sea or whatever. Not to compare myself to Aphrodite, but
I compare you to Aphrodite all the time.
Oh, thank you. But actually, that was 7 novels into. I mean, it's been a great career. It's been a long career, but I have not been a well-known writer, and this is a wonderful new experience.
Yeah. Well, this is the fastest that a book of yours has done this well. Is that correct? Or
my agent and my editor think I'm hilarious because apparently You Should Have Known was on the New York Times bestseller list for a week, but I forgot. So they think I'm a total idiot because when this book got on the New York Times bestseller list, I was like, oh my God, this never happened before. And they're like, Jane, you're on the New York Times bestseller list. But yeah, I mean, it's hilarious. It feels different, and it's felt different from, I would say, even as long as a year ago.
Yeah.
It felt like people were, it was on the radar in a way that no novel of mine has ever been on the radar. There's some other writer coined the phrase "the calm before the calm."
Yes.
To talk about what it was like to publish a novel, and and again, I'm grateful that I've been able to get my books published without having had a success like this. I've had truly terrible sales numbers, and yet there was always somebody who was willing to take a chance on that next book. For the last 4 novels, it's been the same editor, and I'm incredibly grateful to her for showing that faith in me. But yeah, it's pretty great. I did a pop-up book group the other night with a writer I will not name, very, very nice person. The book was terrific. And afterwards, another writer who was in the group emailed me in the chat room, emailed me and said, the arrogance of a first-time novelist who's been profiled in the New York Times. I'm like, yeah, okay. I mean, that is that author's experience of publishing a book. Right. That is what it is like for her. That has never been what it was like.
Yeah. It's interesting that I teach a class sometimes at my my organization in Chicago that is for people with a first book coming out. And we do like a weekend in which I'm talking about, I call it life after publication. And it's like, how do you move on? What's going to happen? Whatever. And one of the things I've started saying to them is, I wish you all the success in the world, but for the sake of your career, I do not wish you your biggest success on your first book.
That is so true and so wise.
Yeah. Like, what would the rest of your career look like? Because I know people who've had that experience where, you know, that, yeah, first book, just like huge bestseller. And then next book does half as well, and then bump, and then down, and nothing ever lives up to it.
Right.
You're 30 years in and everyone still wants to ask you about the first book, you know?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
I play this little game with myself. Maybe you had a similar game called Do I Want Their Career? It was a private game. I played it with myself. And for many years, the person whose career I wanted, she's actually a friend of mine, a wonderful novelist. Yeah, I wanted her career. She was always the answer to the question. I wouldn't say that anymore. I would not say that anymore. And I also would never have said until now, I actually like my career. I mean, it may be that people are just discovering me now, but guess what? Those books are all there. I mean, I haven't changed a word since they were published.
If I can put in a word for, I love all of Jean's books. The Devil and Webster is the one that I think should have.
Here it is.
Yes, there we go. That's the one, because I feel like I could recommend Admission to you, but like, I think with the movie, and you should have like, but The Devil and Webster, it is so infuriating in the best way. I'm still mad at people in that book. and I mean that as an absolute compliment. And it's also the book that I think it's one of my most gifted books, because I give it to friends who work in higher education. It's about a kind of a moral, ethical, political crisis on a college campus.
Right.
And I give it to friends who teach in higher ed or are in administration in higher education. And I think it's cathartic for them in so many ways.
Well, that's good. That makes me happy. I mean, I think in other times I would have been kind of pilloried for some of the things that I wrote in that book. I really went pretty close to the edge. I'm not a brave person at all, but I think I went kind of close to the edge. But I mean, I took my alma mater, Dartmouth College, and I kind of mushed it together with Wesleyan, and I made this fictional college called Webster College in Massachusetts. And it's a kind of formerly white male conservative school, which is now kind of in the full flower of progressive education. And its president is this kind of former feminist scholar who's a single mom, and her daughter, who's a wonderful young feminist, is also a student at Webster. And when this thing explodes, and it's a protest around a professor of color who has been denied tenure, her daughter, it's basically her daughter against her, and she can't, the president can't say why they've denied this guy tenure. And it's
for very good reasons, but it doesn't look like that because you can't,
If she were to say it, I mean, she could get sued, the college would get sued. And, you know, there's a really charismatic undergraduate who's Palestinian, and all of the students are enthralled to him. And you know, there's a media firestorm, and it's the evil college president, the former feminist scholar herself, is now the man, and it's just the pressure on her and her relationships. It's pretty intense. But thank you. That's so nice of you.
It's a really good book, and it just it's one where I think, here's what I think. I think that, you know, if you read the plot in a book club, you're going to hash it out, and but almost all of you in the book club would probably have the same opinions about what's happened. And that works. That's good. If you read The Devil and Webster in a book club, I think you'd come out with people in a very fun way again, but like there would be more like people would start butting heads and taking sides, you know.
As
People
we
would
do
have,
in the real world.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes, you can definitely order it from Northshire.
People were surprised. I got an email out of the blue from George Will, where the Devil and Webster came out, and he said he loved the book, and he said, I can't tell what your politics are. And I was like thrilled. I was like,
Yeah.
because and I say this to my son all the time, that there's craziness on the right now. I think we can all agree that, but there is craziness on the left too. And in that book, everybody gets a little bit of heat from me. Everybody, I'm an equal opportunity satirist when it comes to
Yeah.
asinine behavior on both ends of the political spectrum.
Well, there are kinds of books where you absolutely want your political beliefs to come through, and there are kinds of books like that one where it's about
The absurdity.
right, exactly, yeah, and it's about the pull, and it's about, you know, two sides, they're both wrong, they're both right in this particular situation, this very limited situation, right? And yeah, for you to come down hard on one side or the other, I don't think would make it as compelling a book. So that is the kind of book where, yeah, people, maybe it's a bit of a Rorschach test, but I don't think people should come away thinking, well, and this, you know, these characters see different things, but the author clearly believes this, and it's not like that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. No, I love that, and I loved hearing from George Well, and he even said in his email, "I'm not sure if you'll be happy to get this email from me praising the book." And I'm like, "Are you kidding? What would I get for a whole Congress full of George Wells right now?" Anyway, and then he gave me this beautiful quote, which we put on, I believe, on the paperback. So
oh my God,
that was
no way.
so awesome. It's
Oh,
great.
that's all that. Wow. Oh my God. So I'm going to ask a couple more questions, but as I'm doing that, we would love questions from the audience. And what you can do is type them into the chat. And they don't have to be like elaborately worded or anything like that. It could be anything at all. But while we're doing that, first of all, I was going to ask what you're working on next, and you've kind of covered that.
Right.
But in all of this, I've been wanting to ask about, you know, the thing that we're all getting asked all the time right now, which is writing during COVID and writing, you know, the ways it might have shaken up your writing. You sound like you feel like it was ultimately, I mean, your kids are out of the house. That helps a lot, right?
Yeah.
You feel like it was ultimately, has this been a really fruitful, productive
Well,
time?
I should preface any kind of answer to that question by just stating very plainly that I was absolutely terrified. I was furious. I was scared out of my mind.
You're in New York City.
Well, yeah, and we went upstate. We spent
right.
our time in upstate New York, not far from Saratoga, actually.
Right.
But I was one of those people who was paying very close attention to what was happening in China, and I was a bit of a Cassandra, and nobody believed me. I would say to people, "I'm really upset about this thing. I think it's going to come here. I think it's going to be awful." And they were like, "Come on, it's going to be fine. Don't you remember SARS, Ebola?" And I'm like, "Oh, keep telling me that." I was very, very worried.
Yeah.
And I remember, calling I have elderly parents, and I called them, and my mother was at a meeting, like with all these people, and I screamed at her, "Go home and stay home," and she went home, and she didn't leave the apartment for 3 months. And I was enraged at the political situation that made it so much worse than it had to be. So I don't want to complain because I didn't lose anybody, as some people I know lost people. To say that it was a good writing time for me, it is true, but it is not the gestalt. I know I used that word before, of what the experience was like for me. I was a basket case. The only thing that I did was write this book.
Wow. Wow.
It was the most fruitful period of writing of my entire life, and I hope it never happens again.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. Yeah. God, that's incredible. I my experience in this particular case was different because I have school age kids. So, it's like, well, has it been productive? Has it not? But there have been times where I've been, kind of not able to do anything else but write for potentially, unpleasant situations, unpleasant reasons. You end up kind of in this, fever dream. And it does sometimes, I don't know, sometimes the good stuff comes out then. So Rachel and David are offering to ask questions too, which I hope they will. If you guys don't ask, I can keep asking questions all night, but I really do hope people from the audience will chime in. But I think the booksellers should get to ask questions too.
All right,
let's
hear from the booksellers.
I do have one. Jean, you've really written across a lot of genres. I mean, it's always literary fiction, but you've sort of had a lot of very different styles across your career. When you're starting a new novel that's very different from the last one, are there things that you have to do for yourself to get yourself in the right mindset? Writing a thriller, did you have to read a lot of thrillers or avoid thrillers, or what is that process like for you?
I think it's more that I have no control over what it is, and it has bedeviled my career. I mean, one of the reasons I hopscotched across publishers for the first half of my writing life was because people were angry at me for not continuing to write, in particular the thrillers. So if my first novel was this legal thriller, and then I was supposed to, write a sequel, and then another sequel, and another sequel, and I wasn't interested in that. So they cut me loose. The publisher who published the next book didn't like the literary novel that I wrote after that. They cut me loose. And it sort of went on like that. But I mean, I'm not one of these writers who has, a long line of books waiting to be written. I'm lucky if I have an idea. And they have not all been as plot driven. They're all, I would say, I too have learned to love plot, but they have not all been as plot forward as the plot, or You Should Have Known. So I think I have won and lost readers throughout the time I've been writing, and I feel, and I think I'm about to do it again, because I think the people who pick up the next novel, the latecomer, and they're like, "Where's the murder?" Well, it's not there. I won't be jaywalking. I won't be jaywalking.
I'm going to be looking for that jaywalking plot.
Yeah.
I'm going to be really disappointed if it's not there.
I'm going to make it a jaywalking on Makkai Street. In your honor.
Please. I love it. So we do have a couple questions from the audience now, which makes me very happy. Buffy is asking, were there surprises along the way as you wrote the plot, or was the whole thing clear to you from the start?
Well, I am thrilled that you asked this question. This is my favorite question, and when I do book the writer events, I'm always waiting for this question. It's not always phrased exactly as you phrased it. Sometimes it's, did you find anything out you didn't realize you were going to find out? And weirdly, this question in our book the writer events is asked even of writers of memoirs. You would think people would not be surprised writing their own stories.
Oh, I bet they are. Yeah.
Writers of nonfiction, writers of biographies, as well as the writers of novels. And the answer is always yes.
Oh, yeah.
Always yes. And the response is always surprise at the yes. And I think that's because, when we as readers read a book, it is static on the page. It is black and white. It is set in type. It feels as if it could only have ever been
right
like this. But in the journey to the page, everything is, this is my cat, Peter, by the way. Everything is in flux, and sometimes you throw it at the wall, sometimes it sticks, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it bothers you all the way to the final draft, and then you have to get rid of it because it's bothering you too much. in this novel, there were many surprises because I only knew those kind of tent poles. All of the secondary characters came as the writing came. I have written novels in which major plot events came to me literally a few pages before they were written, and that's super fun and that's really exciting. But in a broader sense, and I'm sure Rebecca can confirm this, one of the reasons we do this crazy thing, which is not a lot of fun a lot of times, is because we are looking for that moment of discovery. And I would even say that if it doesn't come to the author, it's not going to come to the reader either. It's going to feel very inert. I mean, this is the same answer I give to people who ask whether I plot things out beforehand and like write out the cards or a synopsis or whatever, and I don't do that because I want to be surprised. I mean, you can't be without a goal. You can't wander around in the wilderness. You need to know which direction you're going in, but and pretty much what is likely to happen when you get there. But to know everything before you write is fatal.
Yeah. I feel like, when you're writing a book and and it's the right book, it feels like a deeper version of what we get as a reader from a really immersive reading experience, which is, I'm living in this world. I really know these people and I'm surprised kind of by what they're doing. And it is like reading a book for 5 years. Sometimes, and sometimes it's just copy editing.
I think that's another reason why when we're finished with our books, we let them go.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've had this experience when people come up to you and they want to talk about The Borrower or The 100-Year House. And you're like, did I write that? I mean, did I write that sentence? Or what character's name? You don't remember.
Oh God, yeah.
But they do, because they just read it.
Yeah. Well, also sometimes I think, sometimes you also don't remember because what version got published? This plot was this way, or this chapter was here, this character had this name for 5 years, and then I changed it for the last 2 months. I lived with one longer than the other. I don't really, when that book comes out, I know what's in it, but down the road, is that
have you had the experience where the person looks at you like you're insane? Like, don't you know your own book?
Right, seriously. It's I've I know you've had this experience with people returning, for to make movies, or the HBO series, returning to books you wrote quite a while ago. Nothing of mine has gotten made, but I've worked with people on, developing stuff, and it's this sort of this much more intense version of diving back in, especially when it's a book from a while back. Where, I don't know if that's, do you feel like, and then we do have a couple other questions to get to.
I have not even reread You Should Have Known since 2014.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you feel like, I mean, even if you haven't reread it, do you feel like reentering that world, as you talked about it, as you watched it, do you feel like it's changed the book for you?
There were things that I saw on screen that made me go, I wrote that. I think I wrote that. Reading David E. Kelly's scripts, which, for those of you who have A, read the book, and B, watched the TV series, you may notice that after episode 2 of the TV series, it is a different story. And that is okay. But when I read scripts, I noticed that my novel was in his descriptions. He seemed to use my language and my situations to convey ideas about the characters. In other words, it wasn't so much in the dialogue. It was just, I was talking about this last night. We were at Mike Birbiglia's comedy show in New York, and he's working on his next project, and a lot of it is about the Y, the 92nd Street Y, or not the 92nd Street Y, but the Y, the YMCA. And I remembered that I had this experience of seeing this strange woman in the Y locker room. in Princeton. And I put it in the book as just as something that Grace sees in the locker room. And then in episode 1, the victim walks into the locker room totally naked. And that came from my book. And yet it was plucked out of some random thing in the book and given to the character. And even as I watched it, I thought I knew where it had come from, but I thought, why is she naked?
Yeah.
Why is she naked? I don't understand why was she naked? It wasn't her. It was a totally different character in the book. He did a lot of things like that, where he would sort of pluck images or moments and distribute them to other people.
That's fascinating, because I did not put that together, that was based on anything in your book. I was just like, oh, that's a
moment. It was just I remember seeing this woman in the Y locker room, brushing her hair, standing very close to the window, to the mirror, completely naked. It was a moment that had nothing to do with the plot of You Should Have Known.
God.
Here's the naked victim.
Yeah. Oh my God. Because, well, also it's like, it's HBO. We gotta
have a naked woman in there somewhere, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Exactly.
All right, so let's look at Beth's question.
Beth is asking about Vermont. I love this question.
Let's talk about Vermont.
We should read it out loud, which is, you write so convincingly of Vermont. Why did you choose to put some of the plot there? Have you ever lived in Vermont?
Well, I've spent many summers in Vermont. I love Vermont. I also went to Dartmouth College, which is Vermont adjacent. Vermont is a very special place to all of us who have spent time at Redlow. I set the MFA program that takes up the first few chapters of the plot at a fictional college named Ripley. No homage to Patricia Highsmith, of course, in that. But I think when I pictured Ripley, I was thinking about Goddard College, which is where my mother went to college in the 1950s. I did go and explore Goddard during one of those summers when we were in Vermont. And I was very struck by the place. It's a strange place. And I think they actually had an MFA program. Maybe they still do, but it's all remote now. So when I wanted to create this MFA program, I pictured Goddard, and I think that's how I ended up setting the book in Vermont. Later, when I needed a place for our dead student to have come from, it seemed to make sense to make him a Vermonter as well. And Rutland, as you all know, if you're Vermonters, is this strange town which is on the way from anywhere to anywhere else, but some genius gave permission for Route 7 to go straight up the main street of Rutland and destroyed it. It's a highway now with pretty buildings on either side. And yes, David Mamet attended. So did my mom, not at the same time. So I just thought that would be an interesting place because it's a town, and I'm sure there are people who live in Rutland who really love Rutland, but I think it's a great shame what was done to Rutland. I think it could have been a Brattleboro, it could have been a Manchester, Yeah.
So I'm going to ask a question, or say, talk to you for a second, and then it will lead into this other question we have in the chat, which is, I was, I knew that you knew Vermont. I know that you know largely more through your husband, the higher education writing scene, very, very well. I've taught in programs that are maybe somewhat similar to the one you describe in the book, where you're getting people from kind of all walks of life. Some of them are brilliant, brilliant without training, brilliant with training. Some of them are just kind of there, and you're like, what, is this the thing that you really want to be doing? Is this it for you? There becomes, I think, as a lot of writers talk about, sort of ethical concerns about, are we promising all of these people that they really can become professional writers?
Right.
Or is it more like, hey, I might sign up for a photography class. I don't think I'm going to become a professional photographer.
Right.
Is it more on that side of things? But you capture that vibe so well in that kind of quandary of like, you know, what are we
Well,
accomplishing
is
here?
selling something, and they are making money
Yeah,
from these students.
yeah.
Is that a moral thing to do? So here's the thing, and this goes to Buffy's
Right. So
question.
the question was, do you think creative writing can be taught?
And
So that's what we're leading into.
excellent question. I did not get an MFA, but I'm not a purist. I spent 2 years in a getting a second BA, which is a useless degree, even though it magically turns into an MA, which in my case was also a useless degree. But my point is that I spent 2 years sitting, reading books, writing poetry in another country, knowing that I wasn't going to use the degree. So is what I did any more pure than going to get a Master of Fine Arts degree? I have had friends who loved their MFA experiences, felt that it made them better writers. I have a very close friend who attended the Bennington Low Residency College and loved it. So, I mean, I'm not completely dissing the programs, but when I was at Cambridge, I read an essay by Donald Hall. This was pre-internet, so you didn't hear about it on Twitter. You heard about it because people wrote you letters saying, we're all upset about this essay that Donald Hall wrote. I went to the library, the English department library, to find this essay that was upsetting everybody so much. And in this essay, he wrote about the MFA programs, which at that time were brand new. So this is the 80s. And they were springing up all over the place in America because they're very lucrative for a university. You don't need laboratories, you don't need gymnasiums, you need a room, a table, and people were paying a lot of money to get these degrees. And when they got these degrees, they were qualified to teach an MFA program. So there was this kind of self-propagating thing going on. But his complaint was that oh my God, no wonder he got in so much trouble for this. His complaint was that these programs were creating Mick poets who wrote Mick poems, and they were all pretty good. But the problem with having all of these pretty good poets was that it was making it harder and harder to find that one or two in the generation who were Keats. Therefore, he said,
Okay.
for those of you who are not Keats, please not write anymore. We're so mad. And you could hear the kind of the outrage. And I was writing poetry then, but I knew I wasn't Keats. I knew I wasn't Keats, and I wanted to be Keats. So, and then like 2 years later, I met Keats. I mean, I met my husband, and he was Keats, and I could see the difference between what he was doing and what I was doing. Besides, my real love was fiction. But so I never did it. But can writing be taught? I actually discussed this with my husband, who teaches creative writing, just the other day. And he said, I feel that it can be taught in the way that you would take an art class to learn to be better. Can it make anybody a great writer? Probably not.
Right.
Because we are cooking because of all the books we're reading, because of the thinking that we've done about language and stories. And the only thing that an MFA program or a writing class can do for you is just to maybe polish the edges a little bit. But there's absolutely every reason to want to gather with other people who love books and love writing books and are trying to write books and talk about it. And there's a lot of that that's actually going on at the fictional MFA program in the novel.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that's perfect about it is, Jake in the book seems beleaguered and tired and washed up and kind of frustrated, but he doesn't resent his students. It's clear that no, this is a place where these people form friendships.
Mm-hmm.
The student who passes away leaves behind some close friends, and that sounds exactly right.
He just wishes he had done better. And
Yeah.
then when he's presented with this marginally immoral decision,
Yeah.
well, I guess it's up to the reader whether he makes the right decision or not. He certainly pays for his decision.
Right. He makes a decision that is not wrong.
It's
I would
not,
say that.
no writer would condemn him for what he
No,
does.
no. I mean, yeah, I would advise a friend, don't steal your students' work.
Well, yeah, but not because what he does was wrong, but because we know how it will appear. And we don't need that. And so when people have asked me, would you do what Jake did? The answer is no, but not because it's wrong. Because I don't need to be James Fry humiliated on Oprah's couch. I don't need to be, a part of a think piece in what's it called? Shelf diaries?
Self-awareness.
Self-awareness
Yeah.
about the immorality of the modern writer. I don't need that in my life. I would rather, not do it and not have that to worry about.
Yeah.
But even so, and I don't know if you'll find this bizarre or whatever, for a novel that is about theft, the theft of an idea, I'm keeping a list of all of the things that people have accused me of stealing the plot from. The plot, and it's hilarious because some of them I never heard of, but there are things like Ira Levin's Death Trap. There's an episode of Law and Order that has to do with plagiarism. I mean, anything with plagiarism is
right.
Oh, this is the plot of so and so. Oh, she took that from so and so, and it proves the point that we take these pieces and we put them together. This is what we do.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe also that there is nothing new under the sun, but. I mean, I'm offended and I'm irritated, but I'm also, that's exactly what the book is about.
That's kind of hilarious. And it's also, I mean, it's almost like people are unable, like they're looking for it within the book, and then they're like taking their thinking up to these outer levels of like, maybe you're playing some huge game beyond the book.
That I'm a thief, that I couldn't come up with an original story on my own. So I took the character of Jake from the character that Dennis Quaid played in DOA, because he's a washed up writer who can't write another book.
Oh my God.
So I stole that.
What I get, I don't know that I've gotten that particularly before, but what I get all the time is the questions about who I based characters on, which I find really offensive because I don't. And it's sort of like
imagination, you can't make them up.
Yeah, like who was this person based on? Did you base this, or like assuming like you must have based this on
yourself?
No, I didn't. I just have a lot of imaginary friends.
I made it up. Yeah, I know it is. God, I think we've used the word offended many times in this hour. Are we?
We're not offended people. I should say that.
No, we don't get offended all that easily. It's just I don't know.
I love it. Well, this is let me say, first of all, thank you for an incredible read, which I got to read before it was summer, but I'm still going to call it doesn't mean like light and fluffy beach read, but an incredible read for summer that I'm enjoying everyone else now discovering, and I get to kind of, watch with glee as they read it and as it climbs the list. So thank you. And thank you for doing this. And Northshire Books, thank you so much.
Thank you for letting me do this, and Rebecca for doing it with me, and thank you all for coming, and thank you, Buffy, for reading the book.
Yes, thank you both so much. This has been absolutely fascinating. I could have listened to the two of you talk all night long. It's really been amazing.
Well, that may happen one day.
I look forward to it, hopefully in one of the stores someday.
Yeah, seriously.
Probably the Vermont store, sadly for me. But thank you both so much. Thank you, audience, for being here. And you can order both of these authors' fabulous books at northshire.com.
All right.
Thanks. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night from Manhattan.